All right, so today we're going deep, really deep, into some thought-provoking stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about Ellen G. White
Oh, wow.
and her predictions and warnings about the future,
Okay.
specifically from her book Last Day Events.
You know, what I find fascinating about Ellen G. White is that her writing, it's not just, some dusty old historical thing. I mean, she co-founded the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Right?
And her books are still studied by millions of people.
Millions, yeah. And she believed that she was actually receiving, prophetic visions.
Wow.
So we're not just talking about, her opinions here.
Right.
What she felt were, divinely inspired glimpses into what was to come.
So what did she see?
Well, she talks about this stupendous crisis.
Stupendous crisis.
Yeah, that's her words, looming on the horizon. And this kind of escalating feeling of anxieties and uncertainty.
Okay.
Does that ring a bell at all
Well, yeah.
to you? Because
It's
it feels kind of like she's
well-
describing, the world that we're living in right now.
I mean, yeah, it's uncanny how what she was writing over 100 years ago seems to mirror a lot of the anxieties people are feeling today, right?
Yeah.
Political polarization,
Oh,
climate change,
Absolutely.
economic instability.
like the recipe for,
a
stupendous crisis.
Yeah.
It's like she tapped into this, primal fear of the unknown, this feeling that things are kind of spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And then she takes it a step further, right, with this concept called the time of trouble.
The time of trouble.
Yeah.
And what is that?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like this period of global turmoil unlike anything that we've ever seen in human history.
Oh, wow.
It's not just like a bad day or a bad year. It's,
Right.
intense war, widespread lawlessness, and as she saw it, divine judgment.
She didn't hold back at all.
No, she did not.
In one passage she writes, "The time of trouble, which is to increase until the end, is very near at hand. We have no time to lose. The world is stirred with the spirit of war."
Wow.
The prophecies of the 11th of Daniel have almost reached their final fulfillment.
Chills, literal chills.
It's a pretty stark warning.
It is, and it's interesting because she seems to connect this time of trouble to the prophecies in the book of Daniel,
Right.
which has some seriously intense imagery.
Absolutely. The book of Daniel, particularly chapter 11,
Yeah.
full of symbolic language describing a period of conflict and upheaval leading up to a final judgment.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how these apocalyptic prophecies, they resonate with people for centuries.
Yeah.
Across different cultures and religions even.
So is she saying this time of trouble is, inevitable? No matter what we do, it's going to happen?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, you see, because in the midst of all this talk about impending doom, Ellen G. White also emphasizes these themes of warnings and deliverance.
Okay, so there's a glimmer of hope here.
Yeah, exactly. She uses these examples from the Bible, like Noah's Ark, Lot escaping Sodom and Gomorrah, and
Right.
the destruction of Jerusalem, right? She's highlighting how those who paid attention to the warnings, they were spared.
There was spared,
from
yeah.
the worst of it.
It's like she's saying, hey, history's full of these, wake-up calls, right?
Yeah.
And those who pay attention, well, they've got a chance to survive.
Right, and it taps into this very deep human desire to know the future, to be prepared, to maybe even outsmart fate.
To outsmart fate, I like that.
And this brings us to another, I think, key aspect of White's work, this belief that specific prophecies are meant for specific times.
So it's not just about predicting, the end of the world in some vague, far-off sense.
No, not at all.
She thought these prophecies had a direct relevance to the people living, during her time and possibly even ours.
Precisely. She believed that certain books, like the Book of Revelation, hold particular significance for people living in, the last days.
The last days?
Yeah, the period leading up to these events that she's describing.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So how do we know if we're living in the last days right now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Thankfully, Ellen G. White provides some clues.
Okay.
But before we jump into that, what grabbed your attention so far?
I think, honestly, it's just the intensity of her language.
Right.
She's not messing around, There's this real fire and brimstone urgency to her message.
Yeah.
She's trying to shake people awake and say, pay attention, this is serious stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to ignore that urgency.
It is.
But there's also this fascinating contrast, this tension even, between the darkness of her warnings and the hope that she offers.
Right.
Through, the possibility of deliverance.
And that makes me want to dive deeper into, what she saw as the path to deliverance.
Okay.
How do we avoid becoming, victims of this time of trouble? What can we do to prepare?
Well, buckle up.
Okay.
Because in Last Day Events, Ellen G. White, she lays out a framework for understanding these prophecies, and she gives us guidance on how to navigate these really complex, often symbolic texts.
Okay, I am ready to put on my detective hat and unravel these prophetic mysteries.
Let's do it. And this is where Ellen G. White's call to action comes in.
A call to action?
Yeah, she doesn't want us to just passively read these prophecies, you know?
All right.
She's urging her readers to really study them and understand them.
Okay.
Particularly those found in, Daniel and Revelation.
I love that she frames it as a call to action. It's like she's saying, don't just sit around waiting for the end to happen,
Yeah.
Get involved, become a spiritual detective, try to decipher these clues,
Absolutely. And she's really upfront about the fact that these texts they're complex.
Oh, yeah.
They're layered, lots of symbolism.
Right.
They're not always easy to interpret.
So, do you think White's vagueness about specific timelines makes her prophecies more or less believable today?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you could say that, her lack of specific dates makes her predictions seem less credible.
Right.
After all, you've got all these doomsday prophets throughout history who've set, very specific dates for the end of the world only to be proven wrong.
Yeah, it's like the boy who cried wolf, right?
Exactly.
After a while, you stop taking the warnings seriously.
Yeah, but, on the other hand,
Yeah.
you could argue that that White's focus on broader themes and principles,
Okay.
rather than specific dates,
Right.
makes her work, it makes it more timeless,
Timeless, okay.
more relevant.
Okay.
It allows her writings to speak to different generations facing different challenges.
That's a good point. So she wasn't necessarily trying to predict the exact date the world will end, more interested in kind of highlighting the warning signs.
Right.
And encouraging people to, prepare spiritually for whatever challenges lie ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
She saw her role as more of a guide, helping people understand the spiritual forces at work in the world, and urging them to align themselves with the divine plan.
Okay, so let's say we're willing to play along here.
Yeah.
Entertain the possibility that White's prophecies, have some merit.
Okay.
What specific signs or events did she say we should be, watching for?
Well, she definitely pointed to certain, trends and events that were happening during her own time, like the rise of secularism,
Right.
the increasing pace of technological advancement,
Okay.
and that growing threat of global conflict.
It's fascinating because those same trends are even more pronounced in our time, right?
Oh, for sure.
We're more connected than ever before through technology.
Right.
But also, it seems like we're more divided.
Yeah, for sure.
And the threat of global conflict, it feels like a constant shadow, looming over us.
It does. And while White saw these as potential, harbingers of this time of trouble, she also cautioned against getting too fixated on specific dates or events.
So it's not about trying to, pinpoint the exact day or year when everything falls apart.
Not at all. She believed it was more about understanding the overall trajectory of history
Okay.
and recognizing the spiritual lessons embedded in these prophecies.
It's like she's saying, don't just obsess over the details.
Right.
Try to see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And I think that's a perspective that resonates even more strongly in our current, information-saturated world, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with, news and opinions, predictions,
Right.
often with, conflicting narratives, agendas, and
Yeah, I feel like I'm drowning in information overload sometimes, Yeah.
I can imagine.
How are we supposed to make sense of it all?
And how do we figure out what's truly important?
Exactly.
Well, that's where Ellen G. White's emphasis on discernment and spiritual grounding comes in. She encourages us to cultivate a deeper connection
Right.
with the divine.
The divine, okay.
A sense of trust and faith that allows us to, navigate these uncertain times,
So it's about finding that inner compass,
Yes.
that sense of connection to something larger than ourselves,
Yes.
that can help us stay grounded amidst the chaos.
Precisely. And she reminds us that even amidst the warnings, the prophecies,
Yeah.
we shouldn't get so caught up in anxieties about the future that we forget to live our lives in the present.
It's true. It's so easy to get swept up in fear and worry about what might happen, but ultimately,
Right.
we have to live our lives today.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another crucial point that White makes, and that is the importance of balancing our understanding of prophecy
Okay.
with perspective.
With perspective. Okay, what does she mean by that? Is it about taking these prophecies with a grain of salt?
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
She acknowledges that even prophets,
Yeah.
Even those who believe they're receiving divine messages,
Right.
they don't have a complete or perfect understanding of the future.
So there are limits to what even a prophet can see.
Yes, there are elements of mystery, things that remain hidden from human comprehension, you know.
No shit.
She warned against becoming so consumed with anxieties about the future that we neglect our present duties and fail to cultivate a spirit of faith and trust
Okay.
in, well, God's plan.
So it's not about ignoring the warnings, pretending everything is fine.
Right.
But rather about finding that middle ground,
Yeah.
between awareness and perspective.
Exactly. It's about maintaining a healthy balance, recognizing that while there may be, difficult times ahead,
Right.
we're not powerless. We have the ability to choose how we respond, to choose faith over fear, and to focus on living our lives in a way that aligns with our values and beliefs.
I like that. So it's about recognizing that we have agency, even in the face of uncertainty.
Precisely. And this leads us to the central question that Ellen G. White poses. How do we reconcile the urgency of her warnings with the need to live our lives in the present,
Right.
How do we find meaning and purpose
Yeah.
in a world that often feels, chaotic and unpredictable?
That's a question that I think a lot of people are grappling with.
Yeah.
Especially today, and it's something I'm personally trying to figure out as well.
It's a question that every generation faces in its own way.
Yeah.
And while Ellen G. White doesn't, offer easy answers,
Right.
she does provide a framework for navigating these questions.
Okay.
A framework that emphasizes, spiritual grounding, discernment,
Right.
and a deep trust in the ultimate goodness of, well, the divine plan.
It's a framework that continues to resonate with millions of people
It does.
around the world, even today,
Even today.
which is pretty remarkable considering she was writing over 100 years ago.
It really is, and I think it's a testament to the enduring power of her message, a message that speaks to the deepest anxieties
Yeah.
and aspirations of the human heart.
And it's a message that feels particularly relevant in our current world, where the future, well, it feels more uncertain than ever before. It really is a lot to process,
It is.
trying to balance that sense of urgency
Yeah.
with the need to live our lives, to find joy and purpose in the present moment,
Yeah.
even with all these potential challenges,
Yeah.
looming on the horizon.
It definitely requires a delicate balance.
It does.
And I imagine it was even more challenging for Ellen G. White herself.
Right.
Remember, she wasn't just theorizing about these things. She
Right.
believed she was receiving direct messages,
Yeah.
about the future.
About potential calamities and
Right, and she felt this responsibility to
Yeah.
warn others.
and can't imagine the weight of that responsibility,
Right,
To feel like you've seen a glimpse of what's to come
yeah.
and then have to share those warnings without
Right.
causing widespread panic or despair.
It's a heavy burden to carry.
It
For
is.
sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in the way she balances her warnings
Yeah.
with these calls for faith and action,
Right.
She didn't want people to just passively wait for the end to come, right?
Right.
She wanted them to actively prepare, spiritually, practically,
Right.
to make choices that reflected their belief in a coming judgment.
So in a way, her message is, it's empowering.
It is.
It's not about being a victim of fate, but about
Right.
taking ownership
Yeah.
of our spiritual lives, about making choices that align with our values,
Right.
even when faced with uncertainty.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that, even if we can't control those external events,
Right.
we can control how we respond to them.
We can, yeah.
We can choose to live in fear and anxiety,
Right.
or we can choose to live with faith and hope, trusting that no matter what comes, we are not alone.
I find that idea really comforting, especially in today's world where it can feel like so much is out of our control.
Yeah, I agree. And it shifts the focus away from trying to predict, the exact date
Okay.
or nature of this time of trouble, and it puts it back on the individual,
On the individual.
on our own spiritual growth,
Right.
and how we choose to navigate those challenges and opportunities
The challenges and opportunities.
that
Okay.
come our way.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not about obsessing over, details we can't know for sure.
Right.
But rather about focusing on our own inner development
Yes.
and how we can become, more resilient, more compassionate, more connected to our values.
Yeah.
The face of whatever might come.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what I find so compelling about Ellen G. White's writings,
Yeah.
They're not just about predicting the future.
Right.
They're about exploring the the human condition.
The human condition.
Our anxieties, our hopes, our search for, for meaning
Right.
in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
And I think that's why her work continues to resonate with so many people.
It does.
Even those who may not, share her specific religious belief.
Right.
There's a universal quality to her message.
There is.
Something that speaks to our shared human experience.
Absolutely. Her warnings about, a world on the brink, her calls for spiritual awakening and a return to faith.
Yeah,
These are themes that have echoed throughout history.
they have.
Across different cultures and traditions.
Across different cultures, yeah.
They tap into something deep within us. A recognition of our own mortality,
Wow.
a yearning for something greater than ourselves.
It's almost like she's holding up a mirror to humanity,
Yeah.
forcing us to confront our own anxieties,
Right.
our own hopes,
Yes.
and our own responsibility for shaping the future, not just our own individual futures,
Right.
but the future of, our communities and the world as a whole.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
And I think it gets to the heart of what Ellen G. White was trying to convey.
Yeah.
Her work wasn't just about predicting the end of the world.
Right.
It was about, inspiring us to live more consciously, more purposefully,
Or purposely, okay.
and more connected to something larger than ourselves.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Last Day events, I'm curious to know, how do Ellen G. White's writings make you feel about the future? Are her warnings something we should take seriously in the 21st century?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
For sure. Personally, I find her writings thought-provoking
Yeah.
and challenging.
Challenging, yeah.
They remind me of the fertility of our world and
Yeah.
the importance of living with intention.
Intention, okay.
And purpose. Whether you agree with her, specific predictions or not, I think there's a lot we can learn from her insights about, the human condition.
The human
and our place in the grand scheme of things.
Well said. It's been a fascinating journey exploring these prophecies and warnings, to say the least.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise
It's my pleasure.
and helping us navigate these complex
Sure.
and often unsettling ideas.
Of course. And remember, even amid uncertainty,
Yeah.
there's always room for hope, for growth, and for a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Well said.